Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show. My guest is famed criminal defense attorney Mike Chase. Mike, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So I want to start off with your thoughts about what are Americans' perceptions of the fairness of the American legal system and its efficiency, or lack thereof.
I think you have to take each one of those separately. Certainly, from the fairness perspective, that may depend on their individual experiences interfacing with the criminal justice system. So there's a whole court of public opinion that will watch cases unfold from afar, and they think it's perfectly fair as long as somebody gets sentenced to a long sentence and they never hear from them again. I think as a general matter, people who have been through the criminal justice system would have a little bit more of a jaundiced view of the fairness. And again, this is all our own personal perceptions, but lots of folks have talked about the jury system as it's a terrible system, but there's none better. And I think that's how a lot of people view it.
I think I would guess, since you've been before many juries, tell me if I'm wrong, but my sense is that attorneys who practice a lot and do jury trials generally feel that juries really try very hard to do a good job.
There's no question about that. Anybody who's ever had a jury trial will be impressed by how seriously those juries take it. There's occasionally, sure, a juror will maybe nod off, but so will some lawyers sometimes as well. But when it comes to the deliberations, when it comes to paying attention to critical testimony, you'd be surprised how seriously they take it. And I think it's in part the work of judges to make the jurors feel how awesome their responsibility is. But it's also the responsibility of the lawyers. And that whole system works together to get the jurors to take every inch of it seriously.
How about the perception? Is there a widespread perception, you think, that wealthy people have a huge advantage in the American legal system?
There's no question, one, that there's a widespread perception that that's true. And there's also virtually no question that it is true. And that has a lot to do with the fact that, look, legal services are expensive. Lawyers have only a certain number of hours in a day. And so we know basic principles of economics drive the cost of lawyers' fees up. So the ability to pay for counsel, and counsel of your choosing, it certainly can benefit your own perception of how well your experience goes. But two, it fundamentally increases the resources available to you to scrutinize evidence, to prepare for trial. And that's just not the case oftentimes for the people who can't afford legal services.
Do you think that the law itself is simply too complicated, that there are so many laws that the average citizen really doesn't have a good comprehension of what he or she is subject to?
As a matter of certain fact, Americans do not know all of the acts that they could engage in that could be criminal, prohibited by some law or regulation, whether on the state or federal level. And so I think that the law is extremely complicated. Now, that's not to say that regulations aren't useful and serve purposes that are great for safety, for our public welfare, absolutely. But the idea that an individual can go through life and comport himself to comply with every single law on the books is impossible.
So should we make an effort to simplify the law, to get rid of laws that are antiquated, examine laws that maybe, while well-intentioned, we really may not need at the federal level and at state levels? Are there initiatives to do that in a serious manner or not?
There have been initiatives abroad. Clean Up the Code Acts have been introduced in lots of countries. America has not yet taken that endeavor seriously. Now, there are public and private institutions that are examining the issue and making policy proposals. I don't think it's a legislative priority right now. And it's easy, legislative inertia is sort of easy to keep lawmakers from striking laws. Look, you don't get any political victories by saying, hey, we made X legal again. Maybe one thing. But there's a lot of other things that you're not going to win in the midterms because you made it no longer a crime to sell triangular margarine. And so I think the reality is Congress doesn't see it as a priority. It's not going to happen without a great push for it, and it's yet to be seen.
Well, I support the law banning triangular margarine, by the way. But that's another discussion. Speaking of your oblique reference to changing a law or approving a law. What about the regulation of marijuana, where you have states that have authorized the possession of marijuana, the cultivation of marijuana, the sale of marijuana, other states which have not, and a federal law which says for all 50 states that it's illegal to do? What's your take on that?
So in broad strokes, criminal law is supposed to reflect, generally speaking, the views of most Americans, right? It's supposed to address what most Americans think is wrongful and what needs to be prohibited. And if things are not that way, then generally speaking, they shouldn't be prohibited. You know, Pew polls have shown that the viewpoint towards whether marijuana should be legal or not legal has completely flipped in just 10 years. So where it was something like a 56% should be illegal, it's now a 56% should be legal. And again, that's a huge even drop in since the 1960s, when 80-something% of people said it should absolutely be illegal. And so,
even though the majority of the 80% probably had smoked marijuana.
Well, they weren't responding to Pew polls, I don't think. They were busy doing other things. But the truth is that when public opinion shifts so dramatically, suddenly are our criminal laws reflective of what they should be? Are they serving the purpose that we expect them to? And that's true when you have, you know, several thousand criminal statutes and several 100,000 criminally enforceable regulations. It's very hard for anybody to determine whether they are all serving the purpose of reflecting what we think should be prohibited.
Do you have any sense, numerically or even order of magnitude, what would happen if, number one, marijuana was at the minimum decriminalized, but even approved for legal use, was legalized across the entire country, and states and jurisdictions as well as the federal government also had the option of looking at people who are incarcerated and based on their conviction, certainly if it were a possession conviction, or depending on how much I'm not talking about a truckload of marijuana,
sure.
that those sentences might be available for, or some type of even automatic commuting of those sentences. What's your take on that?
Look, if we're talking strictly people that are currently incarcerated for marijuana-related offenses, that number is going to be staggering. If we're talking about people that are living with the sort of moral opprobrium of being a convicted criminal for the rest of their life because of a marijuana offense, it's even more staggering. So it's huge. It's millions. And that doesn't take into account the people that have served much longer sentences because they committed one crime while in possession of marijuana. That mere possession of marijuana, while it might be a sort of infraction level or non-criminal level under current law, that presence has created sentencing guideline ranges for these people and mandatory minimum sentences for people that are staggering. And so, again, if there was commutation of all marijuana-related convictions, it would have to also take into account all of the people that have served decades longer than they would have otherwise had marijuana not been an illicit substance.
Any sense of the cost or the cost saving if we were to go down that path? Has anyone made that kind of estimate or projection?
There have been various projections about that. What are the economic, advantages and disadvantages? I think, you have to look at a number of factors. Certainly, some municipalities and states garner revenue from fine-based income from possession of marijuana. So there's lost money there. At the same time, if you looked at the criminal caseload of public defenders, and in some studies, I know in my state there was a study not that long ago that looked at how many minutes a public defender can spend per defendant over the life of the case, and it was on the order of minutes. And again, that contributes to your earlier question about fairness in the criminal justice system. These are excellent lawyers, and they're very committed to what they do, but they simply don't have the resources. So if you go back and you look at what the relief on the criminal caseload would be, just from extracting marijuana cases, that would be a huge cost savings, and it would probably contribute to the overall fairness of the criminal justice system.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with Mike Chase in just a moment.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
Safely stop fires around your home. Introducing the Fire Ice XT 20-ounce aerosol canister. Fire Ice XT is an eco-friendly water-based fire suppressant gel. Unlike a traditional fire extinguisher, Fire Ice XT is a highly effective, non-toxic firefighting agent that is easy and safe to use around your home, family, and pets. Available at Amazon.com or call 800-924-4874.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
Join me and watch The Aaron Harber Show.
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 I'm Reverend Jesse Jackson. Watch The Aaron Harber Show and keep hope alive.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. I very much would like to hear from you about the program, so please send me an email with your thoughts. You can suggest what topics I should cover, what guests I should invite to be on the show, or even what specific questions you would like me to ask. This is your program, so send your suggestions to aaron@harbortv.com. I promise to personally read every one, so email me today. And most of all, thanks for watching. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter for instant notification of new episodes, live event invitations, outtakes, and behind-the-scene photos. And tweet us your topic and guest suggestions today.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at www.harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. We are with famed criminal defense attorney Mike Chase. So Mike, we were talking about the potential impact of looking at the legalization of marijuana, but let's talk about incarceration overall. The United States incarcerates and has in the system almost 2.25 million people, more than any other country on the planet. Some estimates of the cost to incarcerate people and all the administrative efforts are heading towards $100 billion a year. There's one estimate that's been made of the total societal cost of the impact on families, communities, at $1.2 trillion a year. Of course, I don't think they subtracted the benefits of having certain people in jail or in prison, which there are obviously some. What can we do to change those numbers, in your opinion, and keep society safe at the same time?
I think for one, we need to look at not just the number of people who are incarcerated, but for how long they're incarcerated. So those costs dramatically go up the longer a person is incarcerated. And meanwhile, the empirical evidence doesn't show that length of sentence dramatically prevents recidivism. So people are repeat offending whether they serve a year or 10 years in a lot of instances. So looking at the length of time people are spending is one. Two.
In that vein, though, in terms of recidivism, in terms of people being released from jail or prison and then committing crimes, also, isn't it generally true that at a certain point in time, many criminals kind of age out of being criminals? That, obviously, if you're 19 years old and you're out at 24, may not make a big difference. But if you're 25 and you're out at 35 or 40, the odds of you're committing a crime go way, way down. Or if you've committed a crime at 30 and again you're out instead of at 50 or 60, even if you're out at just 40, the odds of your being a repeat offender go way down.
Age is one of the most determining factors of recidivism. Certainly, once you hit your 50s, the likelihood of recidivism falls into the single-digit percentage. When you talk about, now again, that's determined by criminal history and some other various life things, whether somebody has a family that they're returning to, whether they have economic prospects, lots of things, of course.
Health conditions.
Health conditions.
Or I'm just too tired to commit crimes.
Well, it depends on the crime, I guess.
Yeah.
Some crimes you can commit in front of a computer, right? But for sure, age is a determining factor. But again, family services, reentry services, employment prospects, and education prospects. Look, one of the greatest things that the federal prisons have done is allowed educational opportunities while folks are there. Now, that's not a complete solution, but certainly at a certain age, we should be looking at alternative sentencing regimes because the likelihood that these people are reoffending is low.
So there certainly is, I assume, inconsistency across state lines when it comes to efforts to rehabilitate folks who are incarcerated, education, training, those types of opportunities. What are some examples where you see states really making significant progress in this arena? And what are some examples of states where they're really doing very little except for housing people who are then obviously much more likely to, when released back onto the streets, to become criminals? And one reason is they don't have any skills, they don't have any other opportunities.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I can tell you at the government level, so take my state for example. At the government level, my state has not only had for a long time what they call pretrial diversionary programs, so folks don't even end up with a conviction if they can satisfy certain pretrial conditions, right? It's like almost like a probationary period. But even folks who do get out, one place where we see a huge advantage is in the private sector. So there have been various initiatives over the few years for banning the box, so to speak, right? You don't have to say that you have a conviction on an employment application because that is really going to act as a wall preventing people from getting employment. But two, there have been some employers in my state that have demonstrated a commitment to hiring folks re-entering the community, people with criminal records. And I think that I've certainly seen some of those people that have been working at those places for many years, and they seem to be doing very well. And so in my view, those kinds of private sector solutions where these people can come back out into the community, yes, they have a conviction, but they also have prospects, doesn't force them back into the sort of criminal justice system.
So I'm going to jump to some of those people in terms of violent crime. I mean, you're kind of in the middle of all this. Why do we have so much violent crime in America?
I think circumstances of people's individual lives matter. Certainly you have crimes of passion. Those are very unpredictable, and so we have some of those. Certainly we have crimes of violence that are caused by affiliation with gang organizations. A lot of those are a product, though, of course, of people who are raised in communities and don't have access or don't utilize resources available to them. Family units have to be very strong oftentimes. And what you uniformly see is that the violent type crime follows folks that have had very difficult lives. I mean, by the time we get to sentencing as criminal defense lawyers and we're telling a judge a story, it will break your heart. Even times when sometimes I'm shocked, I look at the birth date of my client and it's in the mid to late 90s is their birth date, right? So 1990 something. These are young kids, and they've already got lots of criminal history, and uniformly, economic prospects and absence of family are contributing factors.
All right, how about gun violence in particular? We have approximately 35,000 people die of gun violence a year. 2/3 of those are suicides, typically. No other country in terms of the industrialized world has per capita overall numbers, per capita numbers, anywhere close to us. Some are, and we're literally in some cases 100 times greater, 100 times worse than other countries. Number one, why do you think that is, and what should we do about it?
It would be complete speculation for me because I know that there are folks working around the clock to try and figure out what the solution is to this. And I think that they find that it's multi-factor. Certainly, there are lots of studies that say presence of a gun in the home increases these things. But of course, illegal guns contribute to the gun violence on the street that we see constantly. So the presence of illegal guns, there are lots of initiatives to get guns off the street, but there are lots of illegal guns still on the street. So trafficking in illegal weapons puts them in the hands of people that shouldn't have them. And that's what you uniformly see. Very rarely do we see a lawfully owned weapon used in a street crime, for example. And that's really what the criminal docket shows are the largest number, I think, of criminal violence with guns.
How could we do a better job of at least tracking who has guns or where they're going, what the flow of weapons are, especially when a crime's committed? You really want to know, how did that person obtain that weapon and from whom?
Sure. I think whoever answers that question correctly is going to get a Nobel Prize, probably. I don't have the answer to that question.
Well, I think it's an easy answer. I think whoever gets anything implemented is probably going to deserve a Nobel Peace Prize. All right, we'll be back to wrap up with Mike in just a moment.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
The Rex Howell Broadcaster of the Year Award recognizes an individual who, through leadership, skill, and dedication, is advancing the broadcast industry in our state and our nation. Tonight, we honor Aaron Harber. Aaron has worked extensively in the media as a host, producer, political and economic commentator, and columnist. Today, the Aaron Harber Show is the focus of his media involvement. Aaron, it is a privilege to present you with the Rex Howell Broadcaster of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Just make journalism great again. I'm Aaron Harber, host of the Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today. I'm Aaron Harber, host of the Aaron Harber Show. I very much would like to hear from you about the program, so please send me an email with your thoughts. You can suggest what topics I should cover, what guests I should invite to be on the show, or even what specific questions you would like me to ask. This is your program, so send your suggestions to aaron@harbertv.com. I promise to personally read every one, so email me today. And most of all, thanks for watching. I'm Aaron Harber, host of the Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter for instant notification of new episodes, live event invitations, outtakes, and behind-the-scene photos. And tweet us your topic and guest suggestions today.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at www.harbertv.com.
Welcome back to the show. This is our final segment with Mike Chase. So, Mike, you have a Twitter account. What is it? @CrimeAday.
@CrimeAday.
So, tell me about @CrimeAday. Well, how did you come up with that, and what's kind of the concept?
So I come at it from a practitioner's perspective, right? I deal with, our dockets, criminal dockets are full of the sort of garden variety guns, drugs, fraud, all that kind of stuff. But periodically you come across a statute or a regulation and it kind of makes you furrow your brow, like that it's a federal crime to misuse the government's character, Woodsy Owl, or his phrase, give a hoot, don't pollute, that kind of stuff. And so I sort of looked at some of the literature, and academics for years have been talking about this crisis of overcriminalization. So I said, well, let's see how many things are actually federal crimes. And so I got to counting. It looks like there are more than 300,000 acts that are federal crimes under federal law. Wow. So I'm just taking it one day at a time, literally by tweeting one federal crime every day.
You're good for almost 1,000 years then.
Yeah, I think so. I have estimated 800 and something years left to go, so I've got a little while left to go.
So what are some other examples of that?
Sure.
And is there any effort to, whether when you identify them or anyone else, to have those, especially ones that are totally antiquated, have them repealed?
So there have been periodically sort of novelty bills, I'll call them, that have been entered in, no hope of actually getting passed, that have said, hey, let's repeal these sort of silly laws like pretending to be a member of 4-H or...
That's a federal offense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Also, separate federal crime of wrongfully displaying the 4-H emblem. So you've got two 4-H related crimes.
I'm in trouble already.
Yeah, well, when I was a kid, my mom tried to get me to join 4-H, and my view was that joining 4-H was a crime. But so pretending to be a member was out of the question for me. So I'm safe. But there are lots of other sort of regulatory crimes. These are statutory crimes. So Congress actually had debate and introduced that law to make pretending to be a 4-H member a crime. But there are lots of regulations too that are issued by executive agencies.
What are some? Well, give me a couple more examples.
You know, the Postal Service issues a lot, and you can understand why they issue them. But for example, it's a federal crime to mail a live scorpion unless you put it in a box labeled live scorpions, and you put that into another box that's also labeled live scorpions. So it has to be labeled twice on the inside. It's like
and 2 layers of packaging.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's a separate, prescription that you have to make sure that you're packaging them in a material that a scorpion can't escape from. And so I support that one.
Yeah, well, I wonder if there's a special priority mail rate for live scorpions.
Yeah, scorpion mail. Yeah.
Oh, there it is. There, you got it. Well, give me another one.
Yeah, so aside from mail crimes, there are lots of importing crimes as well. So importing used beekeeping equipment from another country. And again, look, that's a quarantine requirement. They're trying to keep plant pests out of the country. But, it's used beekeeping equipment. Then there are others I alluded to when we were talking earlier. The early regulations on margarine were sort of actually a concerted effort by the dairy industry to stamp out margarine. It was the new kid on the block. It was cheaper. It was just as good as far as a lot of people were concerned. And so they passed a litany of regulations saying basically, well, let's see, it's a crime to put filth into margarine, right? There was no evidence there was filth in it, but they wanted them to have to deny it. And also my favorite one, which is if you're going to serve individual servings of margarine in unlabeled packages on a table at a restaurant, it has to be triangular in shape.
That's the way the consumer knows that it's margarine. I think that's a good law.
Yeah, well, it doesn't specify...
I take back my previous statement.
It doesn't specify isosceles triangle or so.
Oh, it doesn't say a triangular solid. It just says a triangle? Well, so margarine, actually, that's a good way to wipe out the margarine business because to qualify for that, you would have to create margarine in a 2-dimensional form.
In a plane, right? Yeah, exactly.
See, the butter people are smarter than you think. If you could change one federal law, what would it be?
A singular federal law?
One federal law.
Look, it would be it would be actually a law of a type. So it'd be a law of a type that just sort of, in a blanket sense, delegates authority to an agency to make rules that are criminally enforceable. A good example is the Food and Drug Act, okay? Well-intentioned law, no question. We want food to be safe, we want drugs to be safe. But under 21 U.S.C. 331 and 333.
That's United States Code, that's not University of Southern
That's
California.
Right, under the United States Code. So Title 21, Sections 331 and 333. It is a misdemeanor offense with no intent requirement to violate to introduce misbranded or adulterated food, and that can include labeling violations. So putting the wrong font on your food product. It can also include selling ketchup that is a little bit too runny at 20 degrees Celsius.
So I've been involved in committing all kinds of crimes, it sounds like. Okay, one last question in terms of the legal system, and you've kind of proven the whole complexity. What aspect of the legal system do you think could be changed, which would make Americans have a lot more confidence in it?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I think that there's issues with the federal grand jury process, for example. Again, you have to remember that a person can be indicted and forced into the criminal justice system. And when I say forced, I mean, oftentimes there's, of course, evidence of the commission of a crime. But they find themselves accused of a crime without any ability to contest it at that stage. So by the time they are charged with a federal crime, they can't contest that, generally speaking. And sometimes you can work with a prosecutor ahead of time. By and large, not. And the reason that that's a problem is if we look at statistics, well north of 95% of all people in the criminal justice system plead guilty. That means they never take their case to trial. They call it the vanishing trial. And so what you can expect is that if you are indicted, again, indicted with no real ability to rebut it, the likelihood is that you are going to walk away with a conviction.
All right. Mike, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, that was Mike Chase. I'm Aaron Harber. Thanks for watching.
Please contact us. We want to hear from you. And thanks for watching.